timetable that I can't remember who asked about the time.
Should go.
Yeah, that's right. That I think there will be 3 critical dates next year to watch. One is January, which is when we kickstart with the staff monitor program of the IMF, the visit, concretizing on the targets. The other point will be in July next year, which is basically will be halfway through the S&P. Again, just to take stock in terms of where we are, we should be able to communicate as to what's happening during that process. The African Development Bank has funded a resource for communication purposes, so we should be able to communicate on that progress. And then finally, I would say September, October, again, is to take stock to see how the S&P is progressing, because that will be closer to the end of it. And so if we need to make some adjustments, make some adjustments. The aim is that it should be completed before the end of the NDS1 period, which is 31 December 2025. The whole S&P issues should be dealt with. But prior to that, we need an indication from 1 or 2 sponsors for giving us some bridge financing for the arrears clearance. That indication needs to be louder, or at least visible, needs to be declared midway through next year. So I would say June, July next year, we should have a good sense as to who this sponsor is. That's a necessary piece of the architecture in terms of arrears clearance. While the S&P is running, really we want to deal with this issue during the NDS1 period. So when we start with NDS2, on the 1st of January 2026, we're starting with an economy that is free of the albatross of debt. And she asked a very good question about the debt issue overall in Africa. I want to be free of this so that we can access concessional financing. In fact, speaking to that one, which really pertains to the last question, is that Africa needs financing at scale, that is concessionary, that is also long-term, and that's what Adeshina talked about in terms of what the ADF, African Development Fund, does. So without this, we're unable to deal with the development gap that Africa is experiencing across a variety of areas. So this is necessary. So the ADF is a critical piece of Zimbabwe's arrears clearance. By getting this set aside done, it will allow us to clear our arrears, in addition to having a sponsor. One of the creditors has to come forward, step forward. We certainly will encourage 1 or 2 to do so. That was the case when Somalia cleared its debt arrears. So was the case with Sudan. Again, we had a sponsor. That's the architecture. That's how it's worked. On farmer payments, we set aside 55 million for that in the national budget of this year. 20 million for the paper farmers, 35 million for the global compensation deed farmers. So that those resources are in place. What we're doing now was really going through the verification process to make sure that when you say I'm a farmer who is aggrieved, I need payment, it is you who really own that piece of land and where is that piece of land. So that verification process is critical. It took time. But we are ready now to start making the payments. But it's not that we've not been paying before. If we recall that every year, actually we've been paying the farmers, targeting the vulnerable and so forth. But what we didn't know was the extent of the debt. So by coming up with the global compensation deed and the agreements that we've done with the paper farmers, we now know what that liability is. But the process itself had already started. We just paused a little while we're completing the verification process, and that is done so that compensation, anytime now, they'll start receiving a payment. Then the other, what was the question now?
Or the impact
living within our means, eating what we kill. We've always said that's our mantra, to live within our means as a government. If you look at our track record since 2018, since we started, our average budget deficit to GDP ratio really has never exceeded 3% of GDP. In fact, this year we expect 1.4% of GDP to be the budget deficit debt GDP. We live within our means, but that means that we need to really exercise prudent fiscal management, tough decisions. I think we have seen the recent Treasury circular. It's been covered quite a bit. Government has run out of money. No, we haven't run out of money. That's what is called proper, prudent fiscal management. When we say cut down on unnecessary expenditure, cut down on that workshop number 15 for the year. Just cut back on that. You don't need to travel. We only have a month to Christmas. Where are you going? That's what we were doing. So really that's how we do things. So budget deficit will be 1.5% of GDP. So that's how we live within our means. Then on the resource mobilization front, we've done quite a bit in terms of domestic resource mobilization. The 2% tax is still there. Thank you very much. And then we introduced other taxes, the sin taxes, sugar content tax, cigarette taxes, and so forth. I'm just nuancing around the normal taxes or PAYE, VAT, customs, duty. Those are sources of revenue, and we track that very carefully. But we want to keep enhancing that revenue base while managing our fiscal side. So we're doing the right things to stay within our means, and we always run a quasi cash budget system. It has served us well. You might think that maybe we've been too tight. I don't think so. Recall that the average rate of growth in the last 3 years, excluding this year, has been 6.8%. It's the fastest rise rate for any country in Southern Africa. So even under tight fiscal circumstances, we've done rather well. So it has served us well by providing the certainty that is needed. This year we are at 2%. Next year we're back at 6%. For the whole NDS 1 period, 2021 to 2025, we should achieve an average growth rate of 5.5%. And that's very good. It's dead on target. It's dead on target. Then the last one is, why don't you just get on and do debt restructuring? Is that what I understood?
I actually asked why not restructure the external debt? I mean, is it that difficult? It's been done before in other countries.
I think let me leave that to Dr. Adeshina. I have an answer, otherwise I'll answer all the questions. I think the last question was for me. What was it? Remind me.
The benefits of the SD, if it's successful.
The benefits are enormous. Then we can access, more concessionary funding through the fiscus, through government. At the moment, even the donor funding that comes through the country, very little, in fact, zero, goes through the national budget. It goes outside the national budget, managed by UNOPS, this agency, that agency, UNDP, and so forth. Because that's what happens when you're in arrears. No one wants you to manage money directly. It goes through. Then we have to work very hard to see if those resources are actually supporting the preferred or the priority development area. So we have to work hard. And yet if it came through the budget and it's concessionary, it's affordable, we'll know exactly how to use those resources. So the benefit in terms of access to additional resources to support budgetary needs are obvious.